Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, Designs by Dana. Today I am working on a 2-page 8.5 by 11 scrapbook spread. Now these are pieces that I had cut several months ago and for whatever reason put them aside and never finished the layout. So I decided today I'm going to pull this out and complete this layout. So these pictures are from I believe 2023, and a friend and I were out doing the Parade of Hearts in Kansas City, and you can see this heart is a particular heart from the Kansas City Royals to commemorate the team. And so I wanted to make the layout very similar to commemorate this particular Royals heart. I didn't quite remember how I had my photo placement on the layout, so I'm kind of playing around with that, but I definitely remembered that I wanted my heart to emulate the photo heart. So I had some lines drawn on here to add some stitching. So I really wanted to experiment with that. So stitching is not something I typically do on my layouts. So I'm bringing in my Take Your Pick tool, and I am going to make my holes for the stitching. So I'm using the photo to kind of get an idea for how I want that stitching to look, and I really want to try to make it look as much like the photo as possible. So I'm going to try to look at that photo and figure out kind of a pattern for what my stitching will look like. And then once I really figure out that pattern and get a good comfortable feel for it, then it goes a little bit quicker and you'll see me speed up here, and that will speed up the process. And the reason I wanted to poke all my holes first is once I start the sewing process, it will go a lot quicker if my holes are punched, and the needle will go through the paper much easier with the holes pierced into the paper. So it will make that process a little easier. Now for my stitching, I'm using just basic embossing, or not embossing, but stitching thread. And this is what you would use for cross stitching or anything like that. And it typically will come with 6 strands of thread. And so what I did is I divided it into 3 strands, and that's what I'm using for my stitching here. So I'm going to show you just an inch or two of the process. And again, I keep referring back to the photo just to make sure that I am following the same pattern in the photo and what would typically be the pattern on an actual baseball. So as I get more and more comfortable with that pattern, you'll find that my stitching does go a little bit quicker. So as I started this process, I was thinking, man, this is really going to take me a long time. But again, once I really got my pattern down pat, it didn't really take that much time. So I was really happy with how the stitching turned out. So I'm just going to do a couple more of these to give you an idea of what this is going to look like, and then I'll go ahead and do the rest off camera. But you can see here, it's really starting to show a pattern and form here, and I'm really happy with how that turned out. So there's the final stitching, and I was just thrilled with that. So I decided then my blue cardstock here really needed some visual texture to it and some patterns. So I brought in some really old stamp sets, and I combined several little stamps onto one block so that I could really make a virtual background to my cardstock. And I had one stamp here that said baseball, so I added a ball and I added a bat, and then I also added a KC, so gotta represent, right? So I've got Kansas City baseball here. And notice that as I'm stamping this, I'm changing the orientation of the stamp, and I'm also kind of twisting my paper around so it has a very natural look to it. And I'm also going off the edges of the paper. So this is going to give my paper a very natural pattern paper look and feel to it. You'll also see that I'm going to pull in my heart several times just because I don't want to waste my time and ink in filling up the entire piece of paper, so I'm just going to make sure that I'm covering enough paper that will make sure that, you know, the space is properly filled without filling up the whole piece of paper. So while I'm doing that, I just wanted to take a minute and acknowledge that it has been quite some time since I've posted a video on my channel, and I wanted to, you know, say thank you to everybody who's continued to watch my videos and that has subscribed and continue following my channel. My work-life balance has not been great recently, and so I really needed to take a step back, take a break, and really find my creative mojo again. My work is a very stressful work that I do, and the hours that I've been working has just been crazy busy. So I, again, needed to just take some time, take a step back, and reevaluate my creative time and get some of my mojo going again. So had a friend in town this week, and we really spent a lot of time crafting, and it's been really great just to spend a great amount of time in my craft space and art space, and finding some of that mojo again. So I appreciate everybody for sticking with me. Have a lot of content that needs to be put together, so stay tuned for some more videos coming out soon. So you can see that now I have a really nice visual background for my heart here. And wanted to make sure that I leave enough space here at the top so that my crown doesn't stick off the top of the page. And I also want to be very aware of where my letters are on the heart. So when I cut this apart, I don't want to cut into the lettering. So I brought in the ruler and made some tick marks here. And now I can just use my paper trimmer to cut the heart in half. So I'm going to cut that in half. Now I did mat that heart so it looks very much like the photo. So I've got 2 layers of cardstock here that I cut through, and now I can just piece that right back together. So I'm very happy with that. But you will notice that even though the heart is not 100% straight, it's a little bit twisted, I'm not real happy with the letters being a little bit cockeyed or twisted. So I'm going to bring in my spatula and lift those letters off and reposition those. They just looked a little bit kind of wacky to me. So even though I used somewhat of a permanent adhesive to put those down, I was able to pull them up pretty easily. And I decided that bringing them back in and making them straight, even though the heart is a little bit angled, I think having the letters straight gives this a little bit more pleasing aesthetic. So I'm more happy with that. And so I liking the positioning here a little bit better. And then I went ahead and brought in those stamp sets again and combined a couple of those, stamped them and cut them out so I would have some pieces to embellish with. And while I was working on this particular layout, my daughter was here doing some crafting, and she's been making a lot of jewelry lately. And most recently, she's been working with some shrinky dinks. So she asked me for an idea of something she could make with her shrinky dinks. And I was like, why don't you make me a little baseball that I could use as an embellishment for this layout? So there's a little baseball shrinky dink that I'm going to add as well, and I thought that turned out really cute. So you'll notice I'm doing a couple little clusters here, and I'm doing them in my groups of 3s. So I've got that little visual triangle of my embellishment clusters, and I'm just playing around with some of the little word clusters and adding them in here to each of these clusters. And so I think that I'm happy with that. And then I wanted to add in some more embellishments. So I found my white dots, and I'm going to do a little experiment here. And I'm bringing in a red marker, and I'm going to try to make these white dots into little baseballs. I'm just adding the stitching to the dots. And they actually turned out really cute. And I don't think you can see them as well on the video. So you'll want to make sure that you look at my still shots at the end of the video where you can see these a little bit more close up. But they turned out really, really cute. I think I actually impressed myself a little bit with these. So I'm going to bring those in and add these to my embellishment clusters as well. And I was just really impressed with how cute these turned out. And as I started putting these on, I thought, well, I do need some more variety to this. So I actually just kind of looked around at my desk, and fortunately I had just some leftover pieces on the desk that were red that perfectly matched, and they were stars. So I decided to go ahead and pull in some red stars, which really tied out the layout. And that's really, I think, all it needed. So here's a couple close-ups. I don't think the close-ups do it justice, and I still need to glue down that shrinky dink, but that really wraps it up. So make sure you look